Andrew Percy, you grew up in Hull in a normal working class background. Financially, were you comfortable?
Well, I was quite lucky because when I was young, my parents were both working. My dad was a foundry worker for 26 years and my mum was she worked in the local school as a secretary. But my dad lost his job when I was about 11 or 12. When he worked in a foundry, he was a boilerplate maker. So obviously all that sort of work at that time was going overseas. So, we had to rely on benefits for a couple of years. My dad struggled to get a new job because once you've, done an apprenticeship and worked for 26 years, I remember he was in his mid-40s by then, which I thought was really old at the time, but now I don't. But so things did get, tight, so we had to, survive on benefits. But my dad always worked, even when he was unemployed, so he did lots of voluntary work, and he's quite good with his hands, so he tried to make lots of stuff they used to go to car boot sales and sell stuff. But yeah, it was, it wasn't great for a period. So, I grew up with my parents really, walking in on conversations of, things not being all that great. But, he got a job as a market gardener in the end and did that until he was 70. So, we've never had money in the family. So, but yeah, it was pretty bit tough for a while.
And you were a local councillor by the age of 22, Conservative local councillor. When did you decide you were a Conservative?
Well, I think it was growing up in Hull because it was a very Labour town. And my dad had worked in, I remember when I was 10, I went and voted with my dad in 1987. And I asked him who he'd voted for. And he said, I voted for Margaret Thatcher. And all I can remember is, I wouldn't walk back with him because I'd heard at school that, being a Tory was awful. And I was really appalled by this. And then I said to him, well, why did you, when I got older, I said, well, why did you vote Conservative? And he said he'd stopped voting, I think, Labour or in the 70s because where he worked, he said the unions just kept bringing them out on strike. And all my dad wanted to do as a young family man with 2 young kids was just work and earn money. And he never liked the fact that, as he said, the union bosses used to come down, tell these guys they've got to go out on strike. And then it was him who'd lose money. So I think he started voting Liberal. I think he admitted to me recently. And then in the 80s under Thatcher, because it was all the whole buy your own house, support, working class. But my dad, grew up on a council estate in Hull. So it was, first to buy a house, that generation. So I always knew that, my family had become Conservative, like proper working class Tories under Thatcher. And growing up in Hull, everything was run by Labour. And I just remember as a kid thinking, well, lots of things don't work very well. So I used to have a paper round, so I started helping the local party as well. So I just offered and volunteered. None of my family are political at all. And then I, just as I've grown up, I am centre-right. I'm very centrist, but I know I'm on the centre-right of politics, and I like the idea of aspiration and giving people the tools to do best, the best they can in life. And I think that's what I've tried to do in my life, and same with my sister. So yeah, but I got elected at 22. But I was working in America at the time. I came home and stood in my local ward. There was only one Tory on the council, and I stood and then beat this poor Labour guy. So I had to go back to America, give my job up, and then come back. And I did 10 years on the whole council as one of 2 Tories. And then, I resigned just before I got elected to Parliament. But yeah, so I kind of became a Tory quite young and just sort of helped the party from then on.
And professionally, you were a teacher?
Yeah, so I went to, I was first in my family to go to university, so I went to York, not too far away, because then I could bring my washing home every 2 weeks. But I did a politics degree, and then I converted it eventually to law. And I always wanted to be a teacher, but I'd asked if I could do the teacher training after I'd finished my degree, but I couldn't at that point because of the courses I'd done. But it's after I finished law school, I'd pretty much decided I didn't want to be a lawyer. So I started teaching unqualified because you could do I think it was called instructoring. I did that, and then I did my PGCE whilst working, and then taught in Hull for a while, including doing teacher training at my old school, or what was what became my old school. And then I was doing primary for a year before I got elected. But I was a secondary history teacher, but I did primary just for a year, but I'll never do that again because I could control 16-year-olds in Hull, but trying to control 5-year-olds was just a nightmare. It was absolutely a completely different job. But I really enjoyed it, and it was good to be teaching in Hull in the sort of schools I'd gone to, so I really enjoyed it.
You're an MP, it's a busy job. How do you relax?
Well, as you know, it's a bit of a mad, because you're never off duty, are you, with this job? It's a weird job in that even when you're sitting at home at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, you're still at work, really, because colleagues are texting you. Yeah. You check Facebook, which is a mistake. You get in an argument with a constituent, or you see some casework hasn't been done. You think, oh, yeah. So you're never off duty. But I like travel, but I like country music, new country music. I'm really big on that. I go to a lot of country festivals. But I'm really into craft beer, which sounds a bit geeky. But I'm in a couple of beer clubs, and we kind of sit together. It sounds really sad, but we sit together, we taste the beer, we rate the beer, and we go to breweries, like all these craft breweries. It makes me hip and cool, right? So that's what all the young people are into it. But yeah, I do a lot of craft beer. It's probably not great for my waistline.
But speaking of being hip and cool, I hear you've got a tattoo.
I do, yeah. I got
That's hip and cool.
I do, yeah. Well, I got it in. So I worked in Canada years ago, and then. Sometime after that, in circumstances I won't go into, but I decided to go with a mate, and we were both going to get a tattoo. And then he Welshed on it, and I got one. So I got the maple leaf on my arm. So there's a few of us in Parliament I think have tattoos. But yeah, I ended up getting a tattoo. But I might get.
You need your own WhatsApp group. Yeah, Tattoo MP'd WhatsApp group.
Yeah, for the cool ones, right? It's probably really uncool now, like in your mid-40s with a tattoo, I'm not sure, but it looks all right. And I do really like tattoos, actually. I like all the tattoo art, so yeah. But maybe I'll get some more after I've left Parliament. So I did think about getting my majority tattooed on my arm or something. Now, you were a government minister. Did you not like it? Because the reason why I ask it is because you decided to return to the backbenchers after a year or so. Yeah, it was a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, when I came into Parliament, I never really wanted to be a minister. I was never interested in that working your way up, because you have to always vote loyally with the party, and I can't do that because I think I'm just, naturally a bit rebellious on things. I like, it's a bit of a malcontent all the time. So I've always been quite independently minded. But I did it after the Brexit referendum, after Theresa came leading. I thought, well, those of us who campaigned for Brexit kind of had a responsibility to get into government and then put into place the things we'd been arguing for in that debate. So I took the Northern Powerhouse job, but it was at a time when the Chancellor at the time, which was Philip Hammond, was about as interested in the Northern Powerhouse as I am in cross-stitching. Not that there's anything wrong with cross-stitching, but I just wasn't getting any support from the Treasury. It'd been very much George Osborne's baby, and I think there was a bit of anything to do with George Osborne, didn't attract the attention of those at the top at the time. So I did a year of it. We spent the local growth fund. I enjoyed it. It's a great experience, right? Because it was just like, in many ways, an episode of Yes Minister or The Thick of It. And so it was a really great experience. I wouldn't say never, ever again, but I just decided that there wasn't any interest. I was offered the same job again. And I thought, because I wasn't getting the support in Treasury, I thought I'd go back to the backbenches. So I decided to do that instead.
You mentioned your rebellions. Do you feel guilty when you're voting against your party, or is it just, now you've done it so many times, is it just another day at work?
Well, there's that little thrill that goes through something, as you go through. No, so the first time I did it was after I was elected in 2010 on the tuition fee issue, because I was a kid who got full grant. Last of the, I think the last but 1 year to go to university and get all your tuition paid and get a grant. Yeah. And I knew, my parents were very supportive, but neither of them had A-levels or a degree, and they'd never been to university, so it was quite a big jump. And I just remember thinking at the time, this might put off working class kids going to university. Actually, all the evidence seems to suggest it hasn't, so I was wrong on that. But I still think there is something about society lumbering generations with this level of debt. So I didn't like the proposal. So and that was only after about 4 or 5 months. And that was a little bit hair-raising because, you knew, and it was a big issue, big vote. It was the coalition, there were a lot of Lib Dems. But, so I had to basically hide in the building. I always remember this. My staff were ringing me saying, they're looking for you, the whips are looking for you. So I went and hid down the Lord's End because I was just, I was determined I was going to vote this way. But as a new MP, a little bit especially when it was one they were very, very... So I was asked to go and see David Cameron, who was, quite disappointed. You get all, it's like you get, I'm disappointed in you, you're going to go far here, which is what they tell everybody, if you just, toe the line. So I feel a little bit guilty, but I actually think, yes, I vote with my party most of the time because I'm a Conservative, but we don't want automatons, right? Because you might as well just elect a robot to Parliament if they're just going to vote with the party line all the time. So I might rebel this week on an issue, and I think if I think it's in the interest of my constituents, I'll do that. But at the same time, I understand you need ministers, and you need people who are in government have to obviously follow the line, and I don't criticise them for that. But for me, I've just always been a bit of a contrarian, I think so. And I've made the mistake of reading things, right? So, which is what the chief whip said to me once.
That's a terrible mistake. Oh my gosh, the whip. So, I remember saying, because it's enlightening, because you go, what we're voting on? You don't need to ask that. That's what there was. Yeah,
you asked too many questions. I remember one chief whip saying to me when I went in, I said, well, the problem is I went in and listened to the debate, and he slammed his hand on the table and said, I've been here 25 years. I've never made the mistake of listening to a debate in this place. I'm sure he was joking, but it's like,
it's a good joke.
It's the, but I think constituents kind of respect you more if you do show a bit of an independent streak. And, people in my area, it's Yorkshire, North Lincolnshire, we're a bit, we're a bit rebellious. We are. We like to do things a bit differently. So hopefully my constituents have appreciated that. So.
And speaking of doing things a bit differently, so you were baptised into the Church of England. In 2017, you converted to Judaism. Why?
Yes, I was always really interested in the Jewish faith ever since I was a kid, and there was always some rumour in the family that there was some Jewish ancestry and all that. So I was always interested. But it was actually the first time I went to Israel, just after I'd been elected, I felt a really strong connection to the place. I can't really describe it, but it was just really strange. You read about people having these connections, and I always think you read a load of old cobblers. And then actually I went and, I did on this example. So I just became really interested in Judaism from then on. Always had a bit of an interest. Started doing a lot more family history research and all that. And then just kind of became more and more interested. I started attending services at a local synagogue. And then eventually I decided I wanted to convert. So I went through that whole process of converting, which took a couple of years. A really nice rabbi who led me through all that. I'm really good friends with now, and I'm really pleased I did, because I just kind of do feel a really strong connection with the Jewish faith and with Israel as well. Actually, for me, it's also manifested in that of belief in the state of Israel and a safe place for Jews. So that's why I've spent a lot of time in Parliament, supporting Israel and also on anti-Semitism. I currently chair the all-party group on that. So it was a really rewarding experience to do.
Fascinating. Right, so let's see how straight talking you are on this. Final question. Your party is having a few bumps in the road at the moment. Some people robustly defend the Prime Minister, other colleagues stick the boot in a bit. How do you personally deal with the current bumps in the road, shall we call them?
Look, it's tricky. It's difficult. And on one hand, I go back to constituents on this issue and say, particularly on this birthday cake situation, in that, I don't defend any of it. But frankly, if anybody in my office at that point had turned up with a birthday cake, it's just we're all so thoughtless in my office that we don't buy each other birthday cakes. I might have thought that, okay, that was probably within the rules because we're all working together anyway. So on that particular example, I'm not too exercised, but some of the other things you've heard, I don't defend one little bit. Big issue in my area is the steel industry. And this is what I say to constituents when they contact me on this. Whatever you might think about the shenanigans, the goings on in number 10, the truth is the current Prime Minister, who I did back for the leadership, but this is somebody I also once said I wouldn't put in charge of a duster, let alone the country. So when I went to see him, he did say, well, that's a bit of a problem. I said, well, not for you, it's more for me because I'm the one who said it. But I did support him because I thought we had to get Brexit done, and we, having had the, period we'd had before, I think that was the right decision. But actually on the steel issue locally, this Prime Minister has been our biggest defender, supporter, has intervened 3 times, and thousands of jobs in my area depend on that. So when I look at it, I say to constituents, I have to, of course, be cognizant of what people are saying about 2 years ago, but I got to think about now, who are the alternatives? And on a big issue like the steel sector, where the Prime Minister has intervened to provide hundreds of millions of pounds of support against other parts of government, had to fight other departments of government, Treasury, for that support, then, there's no doubt that for our area, this Prime Minister is the best Prime Minister we've had for the steel industry. So I kind of try and balance it like that and just explain that to constituents and say, look, the process isn't over yet. I don't know what I'll think if there are more fines or, once we've seen the final Sue Gray report. But at this moment in time, yes, of course, I'm peeved off about some of the things that have been going on that shouldn't have been, even if you could have technically thought they were allowed. But then I have to think about the current Prime Minister's pretty good for my area in terms of the funding we've received and the steel sector. So I try and balance it like that and just explain that to constituents. And for quite a few of them, they come back and say, well, actually, yeah, I see you're in a difficult position. I get that. Others, of course, just come back with personal abuse, but you know that as well as me. Yeah. Some people you'll never please, but it is pretty messy. And I did go and see the PM for a one-on-one, and said to him, look, you've got to sort this out. We can't have this kind of disorder and lack of clear leadership and professionalism in number 10 into the future. So you've got to make changes, and some changes were made. They weren't necessarily in line with what I would have liked, but hopefully there are lessons being learned from this.
You can have the straight talking stick, definitely, and the straight talking award.
Well, there's no point not, is there? I always say, like, when I first got elected, and people would say, well, how do you deal with things, these questions? So if you just say what you think, you can't go wrong, can you? And if you say what you think and give an honest answer to stuff, then how can anyone, you can't trip yourself up, can you? Because if you say what's really in your head, if people don't like it, say, well, I'm just telling you as it is. If you don't like me, you can pop down the polling station and find someone else to do this job. There's no good of, I can't be doing with all the, giving the lines and all that. It's just, what's the point of getting elected if you can't say what you think?
Andrew Percy. Brilliant stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.